Hi, my name is Doug Lucas, and I serve as president of Team Expansion. If you're a guest watching this recording, we welcome you. But I'm really making this recording more than anything else for our workers. So team members, this is for you. And as you know, this is the second in a series of 4 videos. The first one we talked about was getting the basics down pat. And we talked about how we would try to figure out a way to be a self-feeder on the word and in prayer, how we can try to just devour 4 or 5 chapters a day, find a system like that that would work for you. And also we dared one another to pray for the lost, say 15 minutes a day, and to get the rest that we know that our body needs, our metabolism needs. We also talked about planning our day and including the important and even the undated tasks. We talked about trying to come up with what are the 10 things that are most strategic and valuable that I should do for today. It's kind of what we started with, that left side of the picture frame in terms of framing our lives. We talked about the basics. Tonight, we're moving on to the next part of the frame. And that part of the frame we're going to call Take the Initiative. I love it that I've heard from several of you after talking about the basics. You wrote and you encouraged and said, this is great stuff. That meant a lot. And what you were doing is you were kind of taking initiative to write back, and that meant a lot. You all know what initiative means. This is not a secret. It's basically to initiate something. It's being a self-starter. It always kind of carries that same idea as the word initiate. It also sometimes implies taking a bit of a risk, stepping out on the edge. I think about, for example, those firemen that were going into the World Trade Center while thousands of people were trying to stream out. That was a risk. Now, nevertheless, it was a bit of a calculated risk. They had trained for this. In fact, they had sworn a duty to do this. So they felt compelled to head up those stairways and try to rescue and help people. And of course, many people were, as a result of their work, rescued. And so we're very thankful for our first responders then, just as we are now, our first responders that are helping us during this crisis. Taking initiative also sometimes includes an element of assessing a situation, carefully assessing a situation, and making a judgment based on that assessment as to what kind of initiative we might take. Taking your Civil War platoons or brigades and charging out into an open field where you were just exposed by enemy fire might seem like a kind of initiative, but that's not the kind of initiative we're talking about. As it turned out, just to charge out there and take enemy fire is tomfoolery. You know, it's senseless. It's kind of not a calibrated decision based on your best guess of what the situation demands. But at the same time, we don't sit back. Even though we're a little bit nervous about stepping out on the edge, we can't afford the luxury of sitting back. And I think about that in this particular time period when many of us are trying to isolate in our homes. We can't afford to just listen to the TV and react to things. It's not who we are. And so I'm asking you just the same as I would ask me. We can't assume somebody else is going to act. We can't do it. We didn't sign up for that. You didn't sign up for that when you decided to receive this mission, this baton that you're carrying in this race that you're running, this calling that you received. And we have to follow our calling now. We have to keep taking initiative. That's what we do. Reminds me of that group that's described in 1 Chronicles 12:32, the men of Issachar. We don't know a lot about them, but we know that they were people who understood the times and they knew what Israel should do. They were discerning to be able to figure out how do we make this work? And I guess in a way, being part of Team Expansion is like that. We have to sort out a way. Remember the passion, creative, strategic perseverance until the results are achieved. We work the problem. We decide to do it. And then we do it. We're decisive. Being a part of this org means doing the right thing for the right reason, for the right people at the right time. That's just who we are. You know, I think about if we're going to talk about relational stewardship, that list of 100 that we talk about in Team Expansion, in a way, doing the right thing for that list means taking initiative for them. That's what relational stewardship is. We don't sit around and wait for them to ask us, what must I do to be saved? We decide how we can try to interest them, how we can try to whet their appetite, how we can try to do something that provides them with an entree to say, well, I'm interested in that. And then we do that. We decide to do that. We size up the hill we have to climb, and then we climb it. That's who we are. As your president and as your founder, in fact, I long for Team Expansion to be known as an action-oriented organization, as an organization that will make it a part of our culture, that we will reach, that we will climb, that we will find a way and we will make it work. Doesn't mean that we all have to look exactly alike. Some of you know that I coached soccer at a high school varsity boys level for 10 years. And in that time of coaching soccer, I always loved talking about attack. Now, some coaches, when they talk about attack, they talk about the first and the second attacker. But I loved also talking about, in addition to the first and the second attacker, the third attacker. Let me quickly tell you what I mean. The first attacker's role is primarily to head for the goal, to take the ball in an attacking direction right toward the goal if he or she can. That's what the first attacker does. Penetrate the defense, try to break through and get the ball to the goal. The second attacker tries to position herself or himself in a place to lend support. Maybe that means be in a place in which you're giving the person a chance to pass the ball. And so you're trying to get open, make yourself look like you're an attractive target for a pass in case the first attacker encounters a little bit of resistance, a wall, so to speak. Be there so that you're close enough to receive the pass. So what does a third attacker do? The third attacker tries to unsettle the defense with some kind of a run that's distracting, something that's innovative, something that's unbalancing. That's what the third attacker does. The third attacker unbalances the defense, makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them move a little bit so they feel like, okay, I have to watch out for whatever this person's about to do. In the little crazy illustration that we have here, the third attacker is pointing to a corner of the field that's diagonally completely opposite where the first attacker is. And all of us that have watched soccer have seen that happen. That opposite side runner makes a run into a space that the ball isn't there yet. During that run, the first attacker gets his or her head up and sees that run, demanding for the ball. The run is so hard, it says, I want that ball. Now, maybe all that run does is causes the defense to shift and creates an opening for the first attacker. If so, well, then the third attacker did her job. But we've all seen that beautiful 40-yard ping that lands in an open space right in front of the third attacker's run, at which point the third attacker now becomes the first attacker. And everybody begins to play his or her part along with her. That's the way a team works. It doesn't look like we're doing exactly the same thing, but we're all working together. In the same way, we won't always look like some famous apostolic, pick somebody's name like Yin Kai in the case of that movement we hear about in China that gradually grew until finally there were, 1.7 and then 2 million people involved in this movement. It all started with one guy. Now, if you ask people, what was Yin Kai like in that movement? Yin Kai was driven. He would work from sun up till sundown. In fact, I'm told that in the first month, he had 60, not 6, not 16, 60 different groups started. He was literally killing himself so that he could get the word out. He was so driven. Not everybody's going to do that. We need the supporting attackers that help a person. And we need the third attackers that try to provide that factor of giving options, so to speak. We all work together as a team, and that's the way we have to work together now. As a young teen, I was out in our front driveway playing basketball with my buddy Bob. And Bob was facing the goal from his side of the goal and started to shoot. And then I noticed he just paused and his eyes just grew so large like silver dollars. And I tried to trace their stare and I looked in the direction just in time to see a pickup truck roll or flipped into its last position with the entire truck resting on its bed. It had crashed along a bridge abutment along an old country road that ran alongside our property. We both hopped on our bicycles and we pedaled for all it was worth as little seventh graders, getting over to that spot, and it happened that we were the first to the scene. I am the last person in the world that should have been first on that scene. I was not an EMT. I was not an ambulance driver or prepared paramedic. I had had a couple of courses with the Boy Scouts in first aid, and that was it. We were a small town. We were 20 minutes away from an ambulance, and there was not a medic in our entire community. I was all that these people had. So I crawled into that truck, and as I did, I yelled at Bob, "Bob, call the ambulance so they're on their way." And then I dove underneath that truck bed. Now, it was a rainy morning, and the rain was still coming down, and I couldn't tell if the steam off the engine was because it was smoldering or because of that gasoline that I smelled. I couldn't tell for sure, but I did. I got under that pickup truck bed, and here was Starlene Wagner's mom. I didn't know her personally, but I knew her enough to recognize her, and I knew Starlene. I immediately saw that she looked like she had been flipped, of course, obviously, out of the cab that she was driving. And here she was. The truck had flipped almost on top of her, but it had landed so that she was under the pickup truck bed, which provided a kind of shelter for her from the rain. But as adults started arriving, they all, one after another, would come up and start trying to pull her out from this truck. I guess they saw the smoke and they smelled the gas. Well, I took a gamble. I said, she was thrown, she could have a back injury for as long as it's possible. When there's not a fire, let's just leave her where she is. She's not in any danger. There's no traffic coming. I kept checking the scene to make sure she wasn't going to be in a fire, an explosion, but she was okay. And that's the way I'd been trained, just in a couple of first aid course kits, first aid courses and Boy Scouts. But I kind of, as a seventh grader, I was telling these adults what we needed to do. And of all things, they listened to me, and I don't know why to this day. Finally, there were 30 adults around this truck by the time took forever for the ambulance to get there. I kept trying to wake her up. I prayed with her. I asked her questions about Star and asked her questions about how she felt, tried to cover up with a sheet in case she is getting shock. But finally, the ambulance arrived, and the paramedics didn't say much, but as they put all the neck brace and backboard on her to lift her over to that gurney and started to pull her away, they kind of just shouted over their shoulders. And by this time, the adults could hear them, and they said, "Hey, good job, kid, keeping her steady there so she didn't aggravate this back injury." And all those adults kind of lowered their heads. I don't tell that story to try to pat myself on the back because, to be honest, I was the last person that should have been in that situation. I had so little training. It was just an ounce of training. But boy, for whatever reason, I guess I did. I took that initiative. And I'm telling you that story today to say, we've got to seize the day. We've got to try to be like that Desmond Doss who was in that movie, featured in that movie, Hacksaw Ridge. The funny thing about that movie is it's really not far from true. On that day in that escarpment that people would nickname Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa, as the opposing forces, the Japanese drove them to the edge, about 50 or 55 guys made it on their own over that cliff. And then it was over. And the bombing and the burning and the smell of that fire closed in, and nightfall landed, and that was it. But for some reason, Desmond Doss, who was a trained medic, wouldn't give up, and he laid there at first, and the movie shows him looking up in the sky saying, "God, I'm not hearing you right now. I don't know what to do. Please help me." And about that time in the movie, he hears this voice yelling, just barely audible, "Medic, medic." Right then, Desmond Doss knew what to do. So he went over after that person, and the movie shows it one after another. Now, we don't know the individual stories of all those people, but Desmond Doss did. And sure enough, he is credited in the official description of this battle at saving between 50 and 100 guys. So let's call it 75 guys, pulling them single-handedly to the edge of that cliff and lowering them throughout the night with a rope. It's a true story. That's what Desmond Doss did. As we finish this video, we're going to listen to that video of Desmond Doss. Why? Because sometimes we don't know what is in our future. We don't know what we're supposed to do, but we just got to try to do the next right thing. One of those emails I got from that first video that we did yesterday was from Matt Rogie. And Matt said, in the past 5 years, how many life-changing habits have we implemented in our lives? And he had come across this book called, One More Thing, One Next Thing. And he had read this, and he had asked himself that a while back, a few months back, what's the one thing I need to do next? And that's exactly what we're saying. Ask ourselves, what's the one next thing? The one right thing. I haven't seen Frozen 2, but I'm told one of the songs in Frozen 2 says this, that I can't always see all the way down the future. I don't know what tomorrow is going to be like. It's probably going to be different than today. But here's what I got to do. I just got to do the next right thing. That's all I got to do is the next right thing. We don't know what's going to happen next week or next month. We don't know how long this pandemic's going to hover, but we can't wait. We can't just sit around. We can't just react. We have to take initiative and figure out what's the calling that God's given us. And that's the top of the picture frame. Let's watch as we listen to Desmond Doss's story in Hacksaw Ridge. Listen as we watch.
And when that blood was washed from his eyes came up, man, he says, I thought I was blind.
I thought I was blind.
And if I hadn't got anything more toward that smile he gave me, I'd have been well repaid.
I will love you, no matter.
I just kept praying, Lord, please help me get one more.
One more. Help me get one more. Please. Help me get one more.
When I got this, I said, all right, Lord, please help me get one more.
Help me get one more.
Get up! Captain, there's something you've got to see.
Sergeant Howard, Doss is still up there.
I couldn't do otherwise, Pop.
I won't look too far ahead. It's too much for me to take. But break it down to this next breath, this next step, this next choice is one that I can make. So I'll walk through this night, stumbling blindly toward the light, and do the next right thing. And with the dawn, what comes then? When it's clear that everything will never be the same again, then I'll make the choice to hear that voice and do the next right